There you go.
Alan, tell us about It Ends With Us, starring Blake Lively.
All right, you want me to tell you this one? All right, so based on the novel, It Ends With Us, Blake Lively plays Lily Bloom, who moves to Boston after the death of her father, who she has been estranged from for a very long time. While in Boston, her dream is to open her own flower shop. And while in the midst of this dream, she is sitting on top of her apartment building roof, lamenting her father's death. And in bursts Riley Kincaid, an angry young man who is just frustrated with life. The two of them kind of kick it off. He's a neurosurgeon. She wants to be a flower shop owner. And there's this game throughout the half of the movie of this cat and mouse between the two of them, because he's kind of the bad boy and she's kind of has trust issues, but ultimately the two get together thanks to the fact that Lily hires Ryle's sister Alyssa without knowing they're related, and this friendship blooms. But one day they go to a restaurant to introduce Ryle to Lily's mother, and Lily's old boyfriend Atlas is there, and he suspects trouble, and that's the story up to this point of It Ends With Us.
So this was a special screening on Wednesday that anyone could buy a ticket to.
Yeah. AMC, I should say, AMC promoted this as Girls' Night Out. Girls' Night Out.
And I was the only single man in the audience, as I assume you were, Alan.
I was as well. It was all
women, couples, and gay man couples, and me. But it was a crowded screening. Anyways, the audience I saw it with really loved it. And I'll say I was taken. First, I was shocked. Mm-hmm. This is a standard romance. He's this doctor, a neurosurgeon, a little rough around the edges. She's this sort of broken young woman starting a business. They strike up a romance, and it's very sweet. And I was
in fact, my audience fell for it. I was hearing oohs and ahs throughout the entire first half of this movie.
This love affair is sweet. They move in together. And we're going to get into spoiler territory. So we're putting up the warning, but the only way to talk about this movie is spoilers. Mm-hmm. So if you care about this film, spoilers, because we need to discuss. So, they end up getting married. Mm-hmm. And I'm taken up because I'm going to admit something right now. I'm a sap. This is a chick flick. It's a romance, not necessarily romantic comedy, but it's a romance. And I got sucked in. I thought, oh my God, this couple. And I was shocked because I'm like, wow, it's so weird to see a young white woman with a white man in love in a movie. And her ex-boyfriend from high school is also white. I was like, I'm just saying this. I'm only pointing it out because it occurred to me, this is so rare, and it was sweet. And then things take a turn.
Okay, so let me interject here for a second. Let me interject here for a second.
Wait. This is where the spoilers are. The movie takes a turn. Dip out if you don't want to hear. The film takes a turn about midway-ish in the film. Okay. And to be clear, let me set this up. The ex-boyfriend who she had in high school was her first love. She lost her virginity to him. She thought he was homeless. He was kind of from a broken home. And they were in love. And her father was an abuser. Her father, Blake Lively, the character Lily's father, abused her mother. She witnessed it. She was scared of him. And the boyfriend protected her, the high school boyfriend. Then we get to the new boyfriend, Ryle.
Okay, I need to interject here because I've seen the trailer to this movie. And this is a discussion we had after the movie came out. But in the trailer of the movie, it is heavily implied that Ryle is an abuser.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't think you knew that. I don't think most of the audience knew that, but I knew that. And so
Right.
while I'm watching the first half of this romance, I'm thinking to myself, when's this guy going to turn? When's this guy going to turn? And here's the spoiler alert. He turns in what I call a very Kaiser Soze method, where he is such a great guy throughout the half of the movie that when the cat is out of the bag, you are now forced to go back in time to not only realize, well, what, the moments in which you should have seen the signs, but then they have to bring in flashbacks to show you elements of the original first half of the movie that weren't seen. And I'll point you to the stair scene. And this is, so you and I had a very different experience about it because I'm waiting for it to happen. You don't know it's happening,
Right.
which I find is interesting.
Because it was implied, the trailer of this movie bills it like a sweeping romance, the kind of movie you don't see in the theater very often. And she has the best friend. They have the flower shop together. Hassan Minhaj plays Marshall. He's her best friend's husband. They're having a baby. There's all these things where it's like, this is a sweet, nice film that's a romance, and you never see this. The turn happens and you re-experience things that did happen that were like, oh, he was violent, but you see it. They don't really, they show it in a different way. So you don't realize that he was really an abuser.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the idea that a lot of times when women are abused, they overlook the abuse, that violent instances were accidents, that it was their fault. And I think that's what they were trying to do. It just seemed, I kind of wish it was a little bit more obvious than that, rather than me guessing that was what was happening. I think I have, oh man, after watching this movie, I was like, there's a lot here to unpack. And I think, for me, I think this movie resonates with me in my life a little bit more than most, especially as a man. But Chris, keep going. I want to know more about what you thought about it.
It's so he ends up an abuser. She's reconnected with her boyfriend, the high school boyfriend, who has opened a restaurant near her flower shop, unbeknownst to both of them. They opened small businesses. And she's dealing with the trauma of her father, right? Because it opened with a funeral where she couldn't list 5 things she loved about her dad. That was her speech at the funeral. List 5 things you loved about your dad. She couldn't do it. And that sort of sets things, well, that's weird. And the romance between her and Ryle is actually really sweet. It starts off sweet. He's kind of a player, and she's like, I'm not going to be with a player. And then, she kind of, reels him in. And
she tames the beast.
And he's a beast. So this is what's sort of sad to me, is that they had a chance to have this movie that was just a standard romance, nothing special about it, would have been great. The audience, I can say this at my screening, was not with it.
Yeah.
Once the turn happens in the third act and it's revealed he's an abuser, and she makes some strides to escape and change her life. We won't go in detail.
Yeah. I agree with you. I felt bad for my audience because my audience was really buying this romance.
Yeah.
They were sucked into this romance, and then to have that romance, the rug pulled out from under them, you just sense the disappointment. At the end of my movie, there was mild applause, and a lot of silence. But I think in a way, the message of the movie about domestic abuse, once you get past that, the Kaiser Soze method there, I think people got what the message of the movie was about.
Yeah.
But I just felt bad that in a way they wasted the first half of this movie by investing in this couple.
you are with them. You're like, oh, it's romantic. There's a proposal, and the way he proposes
Yeah.
is so the audience is saying, oh,
Oh
and
man.
I guess that's the message, is a good guy can turn, but it's kind of sad that like we get a traditional romance and Blake Lively is great in the movie.
Yeah.
Like she's very good. It's sexy. They're both like good looking, and they're like, oh my, it was like, I'm sitting here going, this is comfort food.
Yeah.
I'm getting sucked in. And then when the turn happens, I was like, the audience, no one applauded. Everyone just silently left because, and there's also a cringe moment in the movie where she says the title of the movie. Remember,
Well, I have
Alan?
something to say about that, but
I'm not gonna. She says the title of the movie in the movie. Someone should do a supercut of characters that say the title of a film in movies. It ends with us. And I was just like, oh, but it just made me. I mean, look, I think ultimately in the end, the movie is. I mean, the third act is all message, pounding in message, and it's a Hallmark film. This is a Hallmark film about an abuser. Movie. It's a Hallmark film about a charming abuser. That's what this is. But I did not know that going in. And I didn't know the book.
And I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's what's weird. I will give this movie a mild recommend for the first 2/3 of the movie because you don't see movies like this. And so mild recommend, but I was so I want to kind of say it's a bait and switch. It's a romance, but it's got this other thing. But the romance part is so well handled. I think they underestimated.
Yeah, I felt it's like they worked really hard to make that romance angle romantic, and they succeeded. And I think that was the problem.
Worked.
And it worked, and that was the problem. That is the problem with the movie. Again, it did help for me to have known ahead of time. It just, I don't know how people missed it in the trailer, but they did. But after seeing this, it was a lot to unpack. And I'll say it this way. The movie, especially the ending, hit very close to home for me and my family. In terms of, look, I've mentioned before, I don't know if I've ever mentioned, but I was actually in ministry before doing Film Threat. I was working at a church as a college pastor. So stories like this are very familiar to me. I've seen it too many times. I've seen it where women and girls, it's their parents, and sad to say, but I've seen it with fellow pastors that I've known and worked with to be like this. So this happens. This story of Lily Bloom happens. I think the problem is the Me Too movement, where you would have expected the Me Too movement to shine a light on domestic abuse, on parental abuse. Instead, it politicized it. And that, to me, is the greatest tragedy of the Me Too movement. Rather than saving women, it went out to go after men. And I'll say this. I know more innocent men who are caught up in the Me Too movement than actual creeps and bastards who should have gone to jail for what they've done. These people are still out living and wandering the streets while innocent people have gotten their lives turned upside down because the Me Too movement politicized it. So back to this movie, not to get into great detail because it's not my story to tell, but this was, I married into this situation with my wife where she comes from a very abusive background, and the title, It Ends With Us, that is a title we say often when it comes to our daughter, that the cycle abuse that my wife and her family had gone through for generations, it ends with us. And that's what kind of resonated with me with this movie, because it was like finally a chance to raise a daughter, to raise a child, and not have to experience the things that my wife had to experience, and to live as healthy of a life as possible in light of all that. And we've gone through extraordinary lengths to make sure that happens. And it wasn't easy. It was hard. And so this movie, like I said, hits home to me. And I understand what is going on with this, and that's why I have to recommend it, and that's why I have to speak out against the unintended consequences of the Me Too movement, because there are people who need to go to jail, and there are women who need to be saved and experience a new life, so to speak. And so, yeah, I'll give this a recommendation. I think the twist is my only major problem with it. I think they hadn't set up the romance so romantic. I probably would give it a much higher score than I would.
But I would, well, a couple things. But I actually think that the way the romance is handled so well is that's the thing. She is seeing the relationship through rose-colored glasses, so to speak, right? Another flower reference. But like she only sees the good, and the bad is kind of like something she doesn't remember, or
she has to frame it in a certain way.
So when the movie takes a turn and you re-see other things that happened in a different way, like you go, oh, that really was this. So I think they're trying to be authentic to that, which is, I haven't read the book, but I'm gonna guess that the book kind of does that. Like women that fall into this don't see it because they only see the good. And I'll say this, knowing your wife and your daughter is such an amazing young woman. She's so well behaved. I don't know what kind of discipline, but she clearly knows. I'm kidding. I'm saying you have your daughter is a great kid. Yeah. She's just a really, really great kid, really smart. She'll be at screenings sometimes. Yeah. So
she's great. I love her. And I'll say this, growing up myself, my dad was into corporal punishment. That is something, especially in my marriage, it was like corporal punishment is not going to be a part of this household. Discipline is not going to involve hitting. And I don't say that as to cast aspersions on people who use that method. I understand it, but in this situation and in this context, we had to go with other methods, timeout mostly, to discipline my daughter over her life, because the temptation of becoming like this or continuing that cycle is something we had to stop at every moment we could.
All right, so I recommend the film. I mean, but I think it's better going in to know what it is. It is a film about an abusive relationship that starts off really great. I mean, so knowing that, so I would definitely recommend the film. It's not for everyone. It's definitely chick flick.
Yeah.
Hallmark on a higher level. And I don't know, maybe I really miss just a good romantic film. And this, at least parts of it are. Even her high school romance is very sweet. Yeah. Is very portrayed very in a sweet way.
And I think I also felt like that the resolution of that marriage, of the bad marriage, was done in a good way. Yeah. I mean, I want you to see it. I don't want to spoil it. But okay. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it.
Okay, Alan, your recommendation.
Yeah, recommended. I'll give it a 6.5.